Shoulder press or the overhead press with the weights is a good functional exercise. You can do this in sitting. Of course, standing in lots of other positions are good as well, but we're doing a sitting series. Right, so the basics exercise is just to get that weight overhead. The muscles that are going to be doing most of the work are going to be your deltoids, as well as getting some work from here in the serratus anterior. Set yourself up so that you feel like your head's in a good position. You're not rounding your back. You're not sitting up too straight. You just feel like you're comfortable in the back. Feel like your pelvis and your hips are relaxed. And just kind of get your feet and your legs a little more soft so you feel more connected to the ground. Exhale and lift. Focus on the hands as if the hands have a little energy in them. And as you lift, feel like your body is just going to follow the hands. Right, so the hands lead the movement. We're just going to start to play with some different ways of initiation. So hands lead the movement, and then it's just a matter of how does that feel. Notice I'm keeping my elbows pretty well situated under the weight, so I don't want to have the weight too much here, too much onto the outside as I come up. Right, so get the elbows under the weight. Right, so now, which brings us to the elbows. So now, as you lift, focus on the elbows. Imagine the elbow lifts the weight. Notice how that feels. Elbow lifts the weight. Now, as your elbow lifts the weight, think of the shoulder going down. So as your elbow goes up, the shoulder goes down. It just relaxes down. Elbow gets heavy, or rather elbow gets light, shoulder gets heavy. Right? So have that visualization. You're reaching up overhead, elbow gets light, shoulder is heavy, and it's going down. Just notice the difference. Now you could have it so that the elbow and the shoulder both go up, which is what I see probably more often than not. So as you lift, your elbow and shoulder going up is basically a shoulder shrug, right? So that's not what we want to see. That's going to cause rotator cuff impingement. It's going to hurt your shoulder if you continue to do this pattern. So elbows light, shoulders heavy. And then bring the awareness a little more proximal to the shoulder blade and feel, how does the shoulder blade move? A lot of folks are going to be holding their shoulder blades tense. They've trained themselves to hold their shoulders back, down and back sometimes. If that's what you're doing, if you keep your shoulders down and back, you make it difficult to raise your arm overhead, right? We're not designed to have the shoulder blades held in any one position. The shoulder blades are a floating bone, right? It allows us to do all kinds of different things with our arms and to connect the arm to our back by way of some of the musculature that attaches the shoulder blade to the back, in particular the serratus anterior. So if my hands are my shoulder blades, as I reach overhead, my shoulder blades need to feel free to rotate like that. They're going to go up and they're going to rotate a little bit. I could have it do the opposite as well. If I work with the coordination, I could have my shoulder blades do that. But if I'm reaching for something that's high up in the cupboard, I want my shoulder blade to be free. I want my arm to feel light. I want my shoulder joint, the ball of the shoulder joint, to be able to sink down a little bit. And I want to feel like I can open my armpit, right? So I extend my arm up from an open armpit, and that brings the energy up into my hands. And that opening of the armpit is basically going to be the serratus anterior muscle activating. So going back to the shoulder press, I'm just going to leave the weights down. As you lift, feel you got some shoulder blades there, you got an armpit. How is the exercise feel now? If you shift the attention a little more proximal to these structures as opposed to just on the hand, or even just on the shoulder muscle itself, then I could start to go a little more, this is more regional focus. I'm going to start to go a little more global by putting a little weight into one sits bone or the other, feeling my leg resting on the floor. I feel a little weight shift in my legs. I feel the opposite leg get heavy of the sits bone that gets heavy. So if I do a very small movement and I just feel, okay, the sits bone has a little more weight in it, I can now do a shoulder press and connect the sits bone to the shoulder. And I can go even further down. I can connect my foot to the shoulder. And really what I do with the Tai Chi stuff is I think a lot of connecting the body across diagonals and spirals. So in this case, I'll say, okay, my right foot's going to connect with my left hand. I'm still lifting both arms overhead, but I have this sense that there's connection. Right? And whichever foot has more weight on it is my full leg or my dominant yang leg. The other one is yin, it's empty. But they both have a role to play. But in terms of the efficiency of the movement, whichever leg feels like it has more weight on it is more connected to the ground, and that's going to give you better access to the kinetic chain, to channel force through your skeleton, your connective tissue, and your muscles. If I go more into this double-weighted pattern, which is how we describe being 50-50 in our weightedness, our distribution of weight, and then I lift, as opposed to having a slight imbalance, if I lift 50-50, double-weighted, I can tell just reaching my arms up overhead with no weight that this is harder if I'm 50-50. So a slight shift where I put a little more sand, feel a little more weight in one side. If there's a scale under my pelvis or my leg, I can feel a slight change in the weight. And then I lift my arms. It's like, oh, my arms are much lighter. So you can experiment with these concepts as you run through some of your basic strengthening. Has a lot of role to play in general function. If you're able to get your feet and your legs and your core more involved with the functional activities involving your hands, then you're going to spare a lot of stress, shear forces, compression forces. You're going to spare yourself a lot of unnecessary wear and tear.